The first note barely rose above a whisper, yet it carried something ancient within it, something that didn't belong to a 10-year-old girl standing under blinding stage lights in a country far from home. The audience at Britain's grandest talent stage leaned forward without realizing it, their conversations dissolving into silence. Even the judges, accustomed to spectacle and exaggeration, felt something shift in the air. Roni Marley stood alone, barefoot on the polished stage floor, her small fingers wrapped around a microphone that looked almost too big for her hands. Her dark curls framed a face that held both innocence and an uncanny calm. She wasn't smiling nervously like most children her age. She wasn't trembling. Instead, she seemed rooted, like she belonged there, like the moment had been waiting for her. Backstage, her mother clasped her hands tightly, whispering silent prayers. She had seen Roni sing countless times, at home, in the garden, at family gatherings, but this was different. This wasn't just about talent. This was about legacy, a name that echoed across generations. A name that came with expectations, whispers, comparisons. Marley. The announcer's voice still lingered in the room. A 10-year-old girl from Jamaica, carrying a legacy known around the world. Some had leaned in with curiosity, others with skepticism, but Roni hadn't come to prove anything. She closed her eyes, and then she sang. Her voice didn't burst out, it unfolded. Soft, rich, and warm, like sunlight filtering through leaves. It had a texture that felt lived in, like it had stories behind it. Every note was steady, controlled, yet filled with emotion far beyond her years. At first, the audience didn't clap. They couldn't. They were too busy feeling. The song was simple, stripped down to its essence. No grand instruments, no dramatic build-up, just her voice and the truth it carried. She sang about love, about hope, about pain that transforms into strength. Words that could have felt heavy in another voice felt natural in hers. Halfway through the first verse, one of the judges leaned forward, eyebrows raised in disbelief. Another pressed a hand to their chest as if trying to steady something inside. This wasn't just talent. This was something else. Roni opened her eyes briefly, scanning the crowd. For a moment, she wasn't in Britain. She wasn't on a stage. She was back home, under the warm Jamaican sun, sitting on her grandfather's old wooden chair, listening to stories she had only heard through music and memory. She never met him, not in the way most people meet their grandparents. But his presence had always been there. In the rhythm of her heartbeat. In the songs her family played. In the quiet moments when her mother would tell her, "Music isn't something we do, Roni. It's something we carry." And she carried it now. The second verse rose stronger, her voice gaining power without losing its softness. It wrapped around the audience like a gentle wave, pulling them deeper into the moment. People who had come expecting entertainment now found themselves confronted with something deeply human. A man in the third row wiped his eyes. A woman in the balcony clasped her hands together, whispering, "Wow." Backstage, a stagehand who had seen hundreds of performances stopped moving entirely. There was a purity to Roni's singing that couldn't be taught. It wasn't technique alone. It wasn't training. It was honesty. And honesty, when it comes through music, has a way of breaking down walls. As she reached the chorus, her voice lifted, not louder, but fuller. It filled the theater without force, as if it had always been meant to exist there. The lyrics spoke of unity, of standing strong, of believing in something greater than fear. It felt familiar, not because the song was known, but because the message lived somewhere deep inside everyone listening. The judges exchanged glances. One of them shook their head slowly, almost smiling in disbelief. Another whispered, "She's 10. But Roni wasn't thinking about her age. She wasn't thinking about the audience. She wasn't thinking about expectations. She was thinking about the music. And somewhere, in the rhythm of her voice, there was an echo, a faint but undeniable resemblance to something legendary. Not an imitation, not a copy, but a continuation, a thread woven through time. When the final verse approached, the room held its breath. Roni stepped slightly closer to the microphone, her voice dropping into a softer, more intimate tone. It felt like she was no longer performing to thousands, but speaking to each person individually. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She didn't need to. The emotion was already there, carried in every note. She sang the last line slowly, letting it linger in the air. And then, silence. For a split second, nothing happened. No applause, no cheers, just stillness, the kind that only exists when something truly meaningful has taken place. Then, like a wave breaking against the shore, the audience erupted. The entire theater rose to its feet in a standing ovation that felt almost instinctive. People clapped, shouted, some even cried openly. It wasn't the loudest reaction the stage had ever seen, but it was one of the most genuine. The judges stood too. One of them pressed both hands together, shaking their head in amazement. Another wiped away tears without trying to hide them. Roni blinked, slightly startled by the sudden noise, but then she smiled, a small, genuine smile that lit up her face. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't planned for it. She had simply sung. When the applause finally softened enough for the judges to speak, there was a pause, as if they were trying to find the right words. The first judge leaned forward. "I don't even know where to begin," they said softly. "That wasn't just a performance. That was something rare." Another judge nodded. "You have a gift that people spend their entire lives searching for. And somehow, you already have it." A third added, "There's a weight in your voice, but it doesn't feel heavy. It feels hopeful. That's not something you can teach." Roni listened quietly, her hands still wrapped around the microphone. Then came the question everyone had been waiting for. "Your last name, Marley. Is there a connection?" The audience leaned in again. Roni hesitated for just a moment, then nodded gently. "My grandpa was Bob Marley," she said, her voice soft but clear. A ripple moved through the crowd. Some gasped, others smiled knowingly. But before the moment could turn into something about legacy alone, Roni added, "I just want to sing. Like he did. Not to be him. Not to replace him. Just to carry the spirit forward in her own way." The judges exchanged another glance, this time filled with understanding and respect, because what stood before them wasn't a shadow of the past. It was the beginning of something new. As the show moved forward, Roni stepped off the stage, her heart finally beginning to race now that it was over. Backstage, her mother rushed to her, wrapping her in a tight embrace. "You did it," she whispered, her voice trembling. Roni hugged her back, still processing everything. "I was scared," she admitted quietly. Her mother pulled back, smiling through tears. "You didn't look scared." Roni shrugged slightly. "I just thought about the music. And maybe, in some way, that was the secret. Not thinking about fame. Not thinking about expectations. Just the music." Later that night, clips of her performance began spreading across the world. Social media lit up with reactions, people from different countries, different backgrounds, all drawn to the same moment. A 10-year-old girl. A simple song. A powerful feeling. Headlines called her the voice of a new generation. Others spoke about legacy, about how the spirit of Bob Marley seemed to live on. But those who truly listened understood something deeper. This wasn't about living in someone else's shadow. It was about stepping into the light in her own way. Back in her hotel room, Roni sat by the window, looking out at the unfamiliar city lights of Britain. It felt different from home, colder somehow, but also full of possibility. She hummed softly to herself, the melody from earlier still lingering. Her mother sat nearby, watching her with quiet pride. "Are you happy?" she asked. Roni nodded. "Yeah," she said simply. Not because of the applause. Not because of the recognition. But because, for a few minutes on that stage, she had felt completely herself. And sometimes, that's where stars are truly born. Not in the spotlight, but in the moment they realize who they are meant to be. Outside, the world continued to buzz with excitement over her performance. Messages poured in. Opportunities began to form. Doors that once seemed distant now stood wide open. But inside that quiet room, none of that mattered yet. Roni closed her eyes again, letting the music guide her thoughts. Somewhere in the distance, a faint echo of a legacy could be felt, not as a weight, but as a gentle push forward. A reminder that music, when it's real, never truly fades. It transforms, it travels, it finds new voices, and on that night in Britain, it had found hers.